Okay. Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I'd like to go through just a few brief disclaimers. And Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 is a pre-release and is subject to change. And we provide, in this session, we provide no license, expressed or implied as presented. And we have printed and electronic copies have a full disclaimer as well. So, welcome to the Developing with the Global Address Book session. My name is Jude Onyawa, and I'm a Senior Development Lead with the Microsoft Dynamics AX team. Today, I would be illustrating the power of the new architecture of the Global Address Book. I'll also demonstrate how we create new party roles, basically extending the GAB infrastructure to create new party roles and manage addresses and contact information for those roles. I will also discuss how we share addresses while entering transactions for party roles. And I also demonstrate the abstraction of GAB operations that we've actually created for services. So some of the pains and challenges we've addressed in this release. For the two developer scenarios, we've provided the ability to extend the GAB in a centralized and consistent way in the system, and also the flexibility for referencing address information for party roles while you're entering transactions. So basically removing all that duplication of repeating the address information in transactions. We've also made it easy to extend the infrastructure to bring in new party roles and party relationships into the system. And for a system administrator, same thing with data redundancy. We reduced that as well by normalizing GAB information into centralized shared tables. What did we do in this release? So we normalized the GAB into shared tables. We provided code abstractions for the GAB by providing common UI components, EP controls, and shared APIs. And we've also done some level of abstraction in the service area for GAB-related services. We introduced the location entity and an address book entity. We disengaged the GAB from virtual company. So parties are now, party tables are now shared tables. You no longer have to use virtual companies to provide that sharing experience. We introduced date effectivity in names, postal address, and contact information entities. So you can track changes in these entities over time. Then we leveraged the table hierarchy programming model for the party entity. Excuse me. The component in action today is the Global Address Book, and it's one of the application foundation primitives we have in this release. The conceptual model. You probably would have seen this in the last yesterday's session that one of my colleagues, Investment in the Global Address Book. So the conceptual model starts with the party. The party is of a type person or organization. And we have a party relationship as well that gives you where a party can be related to one or more parties. Then another entity we've introduced is the address book. So parties can belong to 0 or more address books. Then party can play a role to one of these entities, one of these party roles. Some of the party roles we have in the system today are listed here. And the extensibility of the GAB also allows you to quickly add new party roles. I would show that just in case you need to go in and add new party roles. I'll be demonstrating that as well in one of my demos. Then party roles can have transactions. Some typical transaction examples we have are sales orders, quotations, etc. Then locations. The location entity. Location is an entity that can be either a postal address or contact information. Contact information, we mean phone, email address, fax. And party can have one or more locations. The last group of entities we call non-party entities. And these are non-party entities that can have locations. So they're references to locations in these entities. The demos we'll be going through today. The first demo would be like a recap of yesterday's session, highlighting the GAB functionality, some of the GAB functionalities we provided, like the quick create, managing transactions for people and organizations. Second demo is where I'll be showing the extensibility of the GAB, how you can quickly add new party roles to the system. And some of the key features I will highlight here would be the common client controls we provide and APIs, and the client coding pattern as well. Then the last demo would be creating a party from an external source. The example I'll use here would be creating customers from an external source using services. So I'll show you a third-party C# client and how we create customers through this C# client into the system. And one of the key features that we'll highlight here would be the abstraction we provided for the GAB operation, so that you as a developer, you don't have to worry too much about handling GAB-related operations. We will do that for you, and you just focus on more entity-specific operations on your service. On that note, I'd like to introduce my colleague Julie to go over a recap of the investments we've done in the global address book. And she'll be showing you some of the functionalities.
Good morning, everybody. Unfortunately, due to some hardware issues, I was unable to show live demos to you yesterday. So we've gotten those resolved, and so I'm going to take you through a quick run of the demos that we saw yesterday of adding customers, either as people or organizations, the addresses that they have, and then using those customers within the transactions. So I'm going to sit down, but you want to slip?
Forward.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to be Marie, the sales representative, and I have two customers that enter in the system. One is going to be a person, and the other one is going to be an organization. So I go to the customer list page, and here's all the list of the customers that I'm able to see. I click on the new customer, and I get a quick create customer dialog. It's a streamed down, a simplified version of your customer detail form where you can enter in basic information about the customer and create that quickly. So the first one is going to be a person, so I'm going to change it from org to a person. And you see the form changes, so I can enter in specific information about a person rather than an organization. So the first name, I'll do Mark, and the last name Hagen. Customer group, I'll just pick anything. And from here I could do a couple other things. Payment terms, delivery methods. I'll do the postal address. And then the street. And you can see that the city and state defaulted when I selected or I entered in the zip code. I could do the phone number and email. So now we have a couple options at the bottom of the form. If I'm really done with this customer and I have something else to do in the system, I could do save and close, and I'll go back to the customer list page. A few other options that we've added. Can we see them? Is save and open, which you could go to the customer detail form and enter more information about the customer if you needed to enter more. The other options here, I'll scroll down. You could go directly into a sales quotation or project quotation and create those quickly, or into a sales order. So for this, we'll go right into a sales order. And there right away, it brings us so we can enter in the item lines. There's no more steps. All of the information in the customer is already there. If we expand the sales order header, we can see that all of the information defaults into the sales order. So now that we've taken a look at the person, remember I have another organization customer to enter. So we'll go back to the list page and we'll do new customer. It's an organization, so we won't change that. And I'll do Microsoft. And again, terms and delivery if we need to. The zip code. And now I know that I need to add additional addresses for Microsoft. They have tons of places that we want to have information, goods delivered to. So I want to go to the customer detail form. If I do save and close, I did save and close. I should have done save and open. So let's find Microsoft. We'll open up the detail form and click the edit. So here we can see on the customer detail form the information specific for an organization. If we show more fields, there's a few extra fields that you could have if it's an organization. If we were to look at that person record that we just created, you'd see a number of other fields that are specific to a person, like your birth date, your anniversary date, if you have any children, kind of those other fields. But we want to add a new address. So we go down. Let's close this up so you can see more of our form. And this address that we entered, it can be used for multiple reasons. They want it used as their invoice address, as their delivery address, as their service. This is kind of their main address. So we go to Edit, and we get a drop-down of the purposes. So here we mark delivery, invoice, payment, remit to, service. So instead of re-entering this address in, for all of these different purposes within the system, I just select for the one address what the system can use that address for. So go ahead and save that. And we can see back on the customer detail form all of the purposes for that address. Now I have one more delivery address that I know that they want things sent to. So I can do add. And we want things sent to the building that we're at, which is Microsoft Advanta. And this is only for deliveries. You can't send any invoices here or anything else. So we specify delivery. And we type in the address again. And we save that. So now we have two addresses here. Now more often than not, Microsoft wants their deliveries sent to Advanta rather than the head office. That's more of a business office. So we can do more options and set defaults. So here we can say that the delivery office, the address that we want set to is Advanta, or we could select the other address if we wanted to. So now when we go and we want to create a sales order for them, we quickly go and create the sales order right from the customer form. So we do sell, new sales order, and here again the information defaults in right away. All of the defaults in the Microsoft Advanta building, and all of the customer information. Now, in case they do want something delivered to the other location, rather than having to retype that information in or going someplace else to get it and coming back and re-entering it, we can click the drop-down for the delivery address, and I'm having some data problems, and you'd be able to select the other address that you had entered into the system. So now we've seen sales orders and the addresses for our customers. One other feature we wanted to highlight is how we can secure the data once it's in the system. So if I'm Marie and I have access to certain parties, so say we have a government, we have contracts with some government agencies, and part of those clauses in the contracts is that only certain people in your company can see that information. So Marie, as a sales representative, is authorized to see that. So if we go back to the customer list page, we want to do refresh. And if we scroll down here, one of those companies is Mercury. So we have Mercury here. Another one is Marsville. If we scroll down, there's a Pluto. So Marie is able to access that information. If I change personas and I were to log in as Nancy, a different sales representative that does not have access to this information, if I take a look at the customer list page, we know that Marsville is one of them. So we filter it and we don't see Marsville. As far as Nancy's concerned, that doesn't exist in your system. Now, if Nancy also, if they had sales orders or invoices and Nancy went to look at those, she wouldn't see that information either. As far as Nancy's concerned, they're not in the system. So all of their data, from their customer information all the way to all their transactions, is secured from those people that don't need access to that. So how was that done? If I were to be Tim, the system administrator, there's just a few steps that I would have had to do in order to get that set up. So I go to Organization Administration, and the first thing is I wanted to set up a team. Remember, there's only certain people that can see that information. So I go ahead and I created a team, which we called the Government Task Force. And I put in 3 team members into that team. Now, once we had the team set up, we'd go and set up an address book, which we set up as government. So now we have an address book to put all of our parties in, and we have a team. We need to connect the two. So if we go to address book parameters, secure policy options, and he turned on secure by address book. So now in the system, we're securing by address book. So if we do assign teams, because we still have to say these are the teams that can see it, for our government address book, he inserted in the government task force team. If we had other teams, we could certainly select those and have them have access to that address book. And people can have access to multiple address books, and they can have access to no address books. It all depends on what information you need those users to see in the system. I think we covered it all. Back to you.
Okay. Yeah, 1 second. Okay, so I just wanted to mention the rest of the presentation will be more developer focused. So I'll be showing some code and also the physical model as well. So the second demo, I would I want to show the extensibility of the GAB and some of the code abstractions we've done. I'll be adding, showing you how to add new school and teacher party role. So a typical scenario is I'm an application developer for an IT department for a public establishment like a state, and they want to manage all their schools and teachers as master records in their system. They have Dynamics AX. So the school is a type of organization, and teacher is a party of type person. So what would happen, let's switch to the demo. So what would happen here, the way it will work, typically, what I'll just do first is show you a working scenario of the party role, and actually move into deep dive into how we actually implemented these 2 new party roles. So typically what would happen is you would have a list page of schools where you manage your schools, and you go in. Your list page will look for schools will look something like this, where it shows a list of all the schools in your system. We currently have 1, and you can go in and create new schools and edit existing ones. So I would go in, create a school called the Fountain School, district number for the school 2345. It's of type, it's a middle school, and the mission statement is to be the greatest. Then you can now add the school to 1 or more address books. As you saw in the conceptual model, the new entity we created. So I'm going to add, I've created an address book called school. I'm going to add this school to this address book. And I'll go in and create an address for the school. A description of the address, purpose, business, postal address, 1 Bellevue Way. I save that, then I'll enter some contact information, say phone number and email address. So business phone and phone number. And I'll make that up, and I'll create an email address. Email of type email. Okay. And that's done. All saved. And I close that, refresh, and I have my school record in there, and I can enter a bunch of stuff, and I can go back and edit it. I have I can see the name, see the address book is added in. I go to the address tab. I see the address I added is a primary address, and see the 2 contact information I added. So now, after that, I also want to manage teachers within this school. Keep master records of teachers within the school. So same thing, same pattern. I have a teachers list page. And now, same thing, you can create new teachers and also edit the teachers. So I'm going to create a couple of teachers within and relate that to the school I just created. So go here, I pick the school. So one of the things we've provided is the party lookup. So party lookup allows you to easily look up parties in the system. So you have a party, and it's pretty extensible. You can filter, and and what I'm doing here is looking at all the persons in the system and using either use one of them or I could go in and just create a new person. So I'm just going to create a new person in the system, a new person as a teacher, and the first name Fred, initials A, Wilson. Same thing, same pattern again. You add an address. So you can see the consistency that we've actually created here. Managing addresses is done through a common form. So it actually helps in customization. If you want to customize it, you don't have to do it all over the place. I'll enter a location, description, my home address. My business address. And we have purpose is here. I think as Julie showed you, you can actually pick different roles for this address. So right now I'm just going to default to business, but I could pick home and any other location roles for this address I'm creating. Then same thing, I enter an address. So 2 Bellred Road, and make that a primary address. I save that, that's in there. Go into the same and enter contact information. Home phone. (425) and save that. Create email. Create an email address. id@hotmail.com. Save that, and that gets saved. So you do that, close that, refresh, and you have your teacher record here. So now, another thing, one last thing I'll show you is we've leveraged the party relationship. The party relationship where you can actually see relationships between the party and the school. So if I go to the address book details page for that person party that was created for the teacher, I can see in here that Fred Wilson teaches in the Fountain School. So if you go to the list page, there's a relationship tab. So this form applies to any party in the system. So basically, I don't need to implement this again. It's already there, and I could see that, okay, Fred Wilson teaches in the Fountain School, and I can flip that the other way to get the reverse relationship where the Fountain School has a teacher, Fred Wilson, as well. So now, how does all this come together? The first thing to do as a developer trying to extend it is to create your entity tables. So I have a tutorial school table that holds, which is the main table for the school entity, and you can see the district number and type. And there's a reference to this field is a reference to the party table. Actually, so I'm treating the school as an operating unit. So it actually references a subtype of the party type. So here this is one of the places where we leverage the table hierarchy programming model, where for inheritance and polymorphism, just for simplification. So I don't have to recreate functionality that is in my parent tables. So then the teacher, same thing as the teacher table has a reference to the school, and person. So person, it references the person type, table. So now, once the table is created, so same thing, you can see there's a relationship in organization to the OM operating unit, and there's a relationship that I've set here as well. There's a relationship that I've set here as well to the person table. So once the tables are created, we go to create the form. The list, we also leverage model list pages. Model list pages is really a quick way, metadata driven, a quick way to actually create list pages. No code written. Pretty much what I do here is create a query that retrieves all the teachers in the system, and I do a join to the person, which is the person and also the school entity, and I plug the query into the list page. So once you create that and you open that up, you have your list page pretty much working, and you bring in the fields. One second. You bring in the fields that you need in the grid to show up in the grid. So you can see in my list page, I have these fields, and they just show up automatically. So once that's done, we do the same thing for the school list page. Now, where the GAB functionality is extended are in the details page. So the details page, so let's say I look at the tutorial school details page. So what happens here is after you created the tables, to actually leverage the GAB pattern, you add the main table for the table for the entity tutorial school. If it's because it's an operating unit, I'm adding the subtype OM operation that holds records for operating units. And if you see there's an inner join typical inner join to your school, then we provided views to give a denormalized view of the table records that make up postal address. So this view will give you all the postal addresses for parties. So basically what I will do here is give it a passive join to OM operating unit, because I want to get all the postal addresses for that party, which is an operating unit. Then for the contact information, there are three tables in play here. The table that holds the relationship between party and location, the location table itself, and the contact information. Now, the only reason why we didn't use views for contact information, because if you notice when I was creating contact information, I was editing in line. So we need to have access to the tables themselves, as opposed to the postal address where we were doing that in a separate form. So once that's done, now I will show you how we hook up all the few events we have to just make this work. Now, the two things we need to do here is in the operating unit, we have to override the active to fill out all the address books that are related to that party when we display the form. Then in written, this is where we leverage another feature for the programming model called unit of work. So what unit of work lets you do, for those of you that didn't attend the programming model session, I'm not sure if it's before this session or not, but I'll just give you a brief explanation of what unit of work is. The unit of work just allows you to, it automatically stitches up the sequencing of writing the buffers to the database. So you don't have to worry about the sequencing. Okay, if I should write the buffer in the main table school first before I write the operating unit first. The unit of work just uses the references and it figures out which one to write first, get the reference back and write the record that actually references the other one. So for example, a typical example here would be it will write, unit of work would handle writing the record in operating unit first, then the rec ID gets created and is used in writing the table in tutorial school. So you would see that the difference between the old way without unit of work would be to override the write or override the delete. In this case, there are new events that are exposed, override written and override deleting. So here, when I'm writing, the only thing I'm doing here is using one of the APIs we exposed to write the relationship between parties and address book. So in the init, so one thing left. In the init, you've got to use same thing. Use the APIs to create an instance of the address book control, and also create an instance of the class handler. So this class handler is what actually manipulates the party information. So we have detailed description of the APIs in the white paper. So I'm not going to go into details here, but all these are all APIs that are available for you to use with descriptions in the white paper that will be given out today. So once you create an instance of the event handler in the init, I'm passing, it needs to have the data source for the main entity, the data source of the party entity, and also the address book control. So once that's done, and you go into the active to set the address books for that party, and also in the written to write the relationship back, you're actually done in managing party information. The next thing is to stitch up the postal address. The postal address, the only thing you need to do in the postal address, like if you noticed, when we're adding the new postal address, we go over to a totally different form. So all that is managed for you. And the way that works is there's a form. There are a bunch of two forms that we've created called logistics postal address and logistics contact information. And that logistics postal address is used to actually manipulate postal addresses. So the only thing you need to worry about is the grid. When I create a postal address, how do I populate it back in the grid? And all you need to worry about here is use another API that we've exposed called update query. And what we're doing here on the view, what we're doing here is grabbing the reference of the organization so that we can, before we execute the query, we can set a range on the postal address to only return postal addresses for that party. Then after the query has been executed, what we do here again is so that you can set the postal address so that we can actually set focus on the location that was actually created when you come back to the grid. So once that's done, the same thing, you go to, then the deleting. So one thing to notice here is in the deleting of the postal address, because it's a view, unit of work can't handle just deleting the postal address because it's a view. So we've also exposed a delete method on the third-party postal address view. And what this would do is go through all the related tables in the view that collapses, that makes up the view and cascade delete the postal address. Then for contact information, the contact information is one thing we need to do here is override the writing, and the written. The only thing we're doing here is saving the location rows for the party when we save the party record. Then create here is just so that anytime we set focus on the contact information grid, we can just go type in immediately in the description. So once that is stitched up, you look at the tutorial teacher form as well. It's a similar pattern with the teacher form. The teacher form, same thing, has overriding the deleting of the postal address and the inint. And the only difference between the only difference between these two is the party type. If you look at the party type, this we're using operating unit, and here we're using a person type. So the only thing we're doing here is overriding the lookup, and we have, this is where we call the person lookup, like I showed you. So we override the person lookup, and in the first name, override it in the middle name, and also on the last name. And there's an API that we provide as well called the person name lookup, and there's also an equivalent for the organization as well. There's an equivalent for the organization as well in this method as well to get a lookup for the organization. So that's pretty much the extensibility of the gap when it comes to party roles. Once this is all hooked up, it is pretty much straightforward. You as a developer, you don't have to focus on the management of addresses and contact information. Everything is pretty much done for you once you write this. Everything is pretty much done for you once you write this, and you go to the details form and you see addresses, and you have your manage address form. Your contact information is here. You can also use the advanced to actually manage contact information. We have the manage contact information form, or you can do it in line. I showed an example where I actually do it in line as well, but I could actually also go here and do that, on this form as well. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of run through the physical model, so give you guys an idea of the tables that were in play and how they were related with this demo I showed you. So the party role. The party role, I have the primary table for the party is the party, and it holds a name. I'll tell you, we use name. We put name. Name is denormalized here for performance reasons. Although we have, I'll show you as we go along. We have a table where we keep a date effective records of the name, but we put name here for performance reasons so that we build the format of the name, at runtime, so that you don't have to build the name every time you want to access from the date effective tables. You just access this directly. So every time we write a name to the database, we build the format and actually write it here as well. Keep that in sync. So party is of type person or organization, and this is the main table for person and the main table for organization. You can see here, these are the primary tables for customer, vendor, and prospect, which are party roles, and they have a reference directly to the main, the super type table for party. The reason we put it directly here is because these three entities could either be a person or a party. Then these other party roles reference the person directly, and worker, applicant, contact person, and user. These are all person types. You would never create an organization type for these party roles. So they reference the person directly, the person table directly. Then the party physical model. So same thing, starts with the main table, which is the dir party table for a party. On the bottom right corner, you have the main table of the organization, which is a subtype of party, and there's a table where we keep date effective records for the names. So that's another place we also leverage a new programming model as well called for date effectivity. We just need to create a table, and actually the retrieval of current name record, the current record, or editing records in the past is all handled by the framework. On the left side, we have the subtype person, and person can have one or more names, and the reason one or more because the names that changes over time. So here we keep track of all the name changes for a person, and there's a name sequence record to actually store the sequence for a name that was selected for a person. Then the dir name affix keeps the titles and suffixes. On the top right, we have the address book table, dir address book, and a relationship table, dir address book party, that holds the relationship between party and address book. And it's date effective as well. On the right side, we have, on the left side, we have the relationship table, dir party relationship, that holds the relationship between parties, two parties. So you can see there are two references here. We hold the relationship between parties, and the extreme left top, dir relationship type table holds all the types of relationships in the system. And this is extensible as well. You can go in and add custom relationships. We expose a form for that too. You saw that in the demo where I created, when I created the school and party, and we saw that school has a teacher party, or party teaches, teacher teaches in school. So this is where it gets all that information from. Then the location physical model. The main table is logistics location. By the way, one thing to note, this is just this is not a full-blown list of fields in the table. Just for presentation, in case we've actually just shown you just the important fields, or the fields that we actually use for references. So logistics postal address. It's a date effective table that holds the postal address, and it has a reference to location. Logistics electronic address is for the contact information with a reference to location. Then the top right, we have the dir party table, and dir party location is a date effective table that holds the relationship between party and location. Then we have, you saw the party, in the demo, you saw where we pick roles, location role, where you can pick more than one role for a location. You know, business, home, delivery address, and such. So this is where we hold that information, where you keep the location, the location roles for a party. And logistics location roles holds all the roles in the system. Same thing, it's customizable as well. We have forms where you can go in and add new roles. So, key takeaways. So, what we addressed here is how you can quickly extend the gap and add new party roles. You saw that. And maintain a consistent, maintain maintain gap functions in a consistent way. So this would allow you focus more on entity-specific functionalities and just leverage all the common abstractions that we provided to manage the gap. So you don't have to focus too much on, oh, how do I go with this new entity, manage new addresses, implement the management of new addresses and contact information. All that is there for you. You can now focus more on your entity-specific functions. So some of the client patterns that I showed is the party, postal address, and contact information. Then I don't have a demo for this on Enterprise Portal, but I just also want to mention that on the Enterprise Portal side, we also have the same level of abstraction where we create EP controls to manipulate address and contact information and party name and also change name. So you get same thing, you get the same consistent feel for your party entities in EP as well. So the third demo. So the third demo here, I'll be showing another level of abstraction that we've done when it comes to services. And we also simplify the schema, the XML schema exposed to external sources. So one of the things with normalization is when we normalize, you have more tables. So as you can see, the postal address from the physical model, the postal address is made up of 3 tables: your location and your logistics postal. The postal address for a party is made up of 3 tables: the relationship between a party and a location, your location table, and your postal address table. Now we leverage views to flatten that out and use that in services so that your schema is not 3 levels deep. When it comes to postal addresses, you would only just need to deal with 1 level. And I will demonstrate, I will show you how that is done, or how we actually implement that. So first thing you need to do when you want to use one of our services out of the box is to publish the service to an IIS server. And then you have your C# code to communicate with the service as a third-party application. So to do that, I'll run through the demo and run through the third-party code and show you how the customers are inserted into the system. Then I'll go to the implementation of the service itself and show you the abstraction we have for the global address book. So the first thing you would do is go into create an inbound port. So you create an inbound port, say cost service. Create an inbound port cost service. Then you could pick all the operations that you want to expose. We're dealing with the customer service, so go in, pick all the methods for the customer, web methods for the customer service. And after you've done that, once you hit the activate, it will publish build the web virtual web application and push all that and have that hosted on the IIS on the local box. So now I have already done one, because what happens is with the activate, it actually goes in, and because we use IL for services, it goes in and generates the IL code as well, and this will take some time, so I wouldn't demonstrate that. I'll just pick one inbound port that I've already created called customer. you can see here, after that is done, it will expose the WSDL file for you. And if you go in here, you can see the WSDL here. So now, once that's done and you've published the service, you go to your third-party application and reference it. So I've done that, reference that here. So I've entered the WSDL, the address here. And once that's done, you can stitch it all together to actually call the service. So what I'll be exhibiting here, what I'll be showing here today is how I'm going to create a service and also create a customer and find the customer as well. So I have a create customer record, create customer method. In create customer, I first create the document. I first create an instance of the document. Where's that? Create an instance of the document. Then after I create an instance of the document, I now go through each of the tables, each of the objects that wrap these tables and set values for them. So for the cost table, it exposes an object in the AXD called AXD Entity Cost Table. I create an instance of that and set that to the document, the AXD document cost table. Set some values, invoice account, create an instance of it, set some value, invoice account, currency. Then there's a reference to party in customer. So I'm going to create an instance of that object as well and assign that to that property. So today, what I'm doing today, I'm going to create a customer of type person. The services infrastructure also supports the table hierarchy as well. So what you would do is I'm creating an instance of person. After I create that and I set the names, I'm setting the name sequence here, and I create an instance of name within the person because there's a reference to table name and person name in person. Then I'm going to typecast the person back to the party instance that I just created here. After I do that now, after creating that, I'm going to do addresses. I'm going to build. Well, basically, what I'm doing here is building the document before I push it back out, push it to the service to create the customer. So now this is what I was saying. What we've done here now is use the view to denormalize that experience. So I don't have to have 3 levels of cascading to build the entries for the postal address. So once I do that, I will just set and create an instance. After I create an array and assign it to the reference, I will create 2 instances of the third-party postal address view object and set the addresses. Then I do the same thing for contact information. Then once I'm done, so this is where the beginning of the operation where I create the document first. Once I'm done, the next thing it does is it calls the create method and it pushes the context and the document. The context is it's to create the company, the customer within a company. So one way to set the context would be you have this and you set that to, we have a company called DMO and I'm just setting the company there, setting the company for the context. But in this case, I have my user actually set up with the default company DMO. So it's going to create my customer in that company. So once all that is done, I build that and run it. So when I run that, it's created a customer and it's returned the account number of 4037. So if I go into if I go into AX, and look at customers, I would see that customer so you see 4037 is a customer, and it has the 2 addresses I created and 2 contact information in the system. So then you can do the same thing for retrieving the customer information as well. So I'm just going to comment this out and comment create customer 37. I'll build that and run that again. When I run that again, you can see it returned the name Bob Marshall created. So that's pretty much what it involves. You can see the schema for the postal address and contact information is pretty much just one level. You just need to go in and use that object and set the information. You don't have to have that cascading effect. So how all this is done, how we do all this in the service is when you look at your AXD class, your AXD for prepare for save, it's by the way, the AXD wizard will generate this. The only thing you need to add, the only abstraction you need to add here is four AXD elements for person, organization, person name, and organization name. We have abstraction classes, third-party service operation that would handle party logic, and you just call handle operation and pass that. All what they do is to walk through the document and extract the party attributes and handle the processing for the party. For location, postal address, and contact information, same thing. We have this class called third-party location service operation. You just call handle party location, third-party location method, pass the methods in and pass the document in. Same thing to walk through the stack, fish out all the postal address specific attributes and write that and handle that on its own. So you don't have to worry about writing GAB operation, specific operations. You only need to worry about the upper part, which is the customer specific operations itself. So, and once to support for your schema, to support for your services to be supported, your query for your AXD has to look like this. Your query for your AXD has to look like this. Your customer, your main entity, your third-party table. Then the next level will just be you bring in the views for your postal address and contact information. So you don't need to have the cascading tables in there. So the schema pattern, like I talked about, we support 2 schema patterns for GAP services. One is for a party role service. So you have your party role and you have your party table, like their party table and person name. Then you have your postal address view and your contact information view. We also support a schema for a transaction service. So same thing, you have your sales order, you have your address for the transaction, your sales order line, and an address for the transaction line. You will also use the logistics postal address view here. Same thing happens is this service, you only need to worry about operations for the transactions. All the addresses will be handled by our abstraction itself. So these are the classes that you saw in the demo that I was using. 3 of them. So, the key takeaways here that we address is simplifying the XML schema for party-based services, and also providing a common abstraction so that at the end of the day, developers can focus more on entity-specific operations, and also there's a simplified integration with external sources. What we've showed today. So we've showed the power of the new GAB architecture and how extensible it can be. You can quickly create party roles. We've also shown some of the code abstractions we have in the GAB, shared UI components, APIs, and EP controls, which I talked about. Then also we have GAB-related services, abstraction of GAB operations, and also a simplified XML schema as well. So with this release, what one can do is maintain GAB information in a consistent way. So this kind of helps reduce customization costs. So you can, if you want to customize postal address and contact, you just need to go to the manage address forms and change that. You don't need to do it in every specific entity. And we've also provided an extensible infrastructure where you can easily add new party roles. Same thing, so that way you now focus more on entity-specific operations and leave the GAB operations to be handled by our shared components. Related sessions. Yesterday there was an investment in Global Address Book session. I think there's later on today there's a session on security AXDS that Julie demonstrated. Here you can see what the extensible data framework is all about. We actually use that to secure the GAB as well. And the programming model improvements as well is another session that's related to this, where they will talk about the unit of work, the table type hierarchy. And we also have a chalk and talk discussion coming up later on today, where we sit down and if you have any questions about the GAB infrastructure, we're more than welcome to address there. Then the white papers here too that actually give detailed implementation of how to implement with the Global Address Book. So on that note, I would open it up for questions. Sure.
So I saw that you have the purpose for addresses.
Correct.
But you also you kept the primary address functionality in there.
Yes.
How are they working together? Because usually you just use the primary address. I mean, what does primary address mean anymore?
So the primary address is what it means as, it's not a role. A primary address means it is the main address of a party. The purpose is the role that this location is playing. So a primary is not a role. So when you go into the purpose, you could pick a bunch of, you could select a bunch of roles, say, okay, this location is going to play my delivery address or my business or home, right? But there's it's totally different from primary. Primary just means what it is, and this is the main address for the entity.
There used to be that the primary address was
correct.
Mandatory. Is it still mandatory?
So a primary address, a party doesn't have to have an address, but if it does, it has to have at least it has to have a primary address. And primary, you wouldn't have to go in, like I showed you, and set up delivery and invoicing and all of that. The primary address is available for all of those functions. It's just that if you want it specifically for one versus the other, you can identify it on the primary address. The primary address is also utilized by some of our GDL functionality. So if the primary address is, say, Brazil, then the functions that are available for Brazil will be available for that customer or vendor record. So it kind of keys off of GDL functionality and provides some additional defaulting throughout the system.
Okay. I have one more question, and that's about the unit of work. Do you need unit of work only for hierarchy tables?
No, you don't need the unit of work for any hierarchy tables.
So it's all tables.
All tables. So basically,
okay.
what the unit of work, like I said, pretty much does is it lets you don't have to worry about, okay, the sequencing of how I write my buffers back to the database. It will handle that for you. You just need to, okay, I stitch everything together, and based on using the references that the relations you've created in the tables, it knows how to work that graph and save it in that order. Yeah. Sure.
Mike?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
She can go first.
Is this working? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to ask about the relations, how you created the teacher of and school of. This is a table, not an enum. The relationship type, is it? It's a data, so that I could enter whatever I want.
Correct.
Yeah?
Whatever you want. Yes.
And how did you implement that? How did you, when you created those list pages and created new teacher, and then the relationship was created automatically, yeah, as teacher of?
Yes, there's
or
a form.
school of.
There's a form
Yeah.
where we can actually go and create new relationships.
Oh, so that
Right.
was not created automatically. You created it manually.
Yes. Yeah, you actually go into the form and create that. Then in the
Show the form.
Yeah. You have the form?
hold on, I'll show you the form in a second here.
So there's two ways. You could programmatically do it, and code it and select that relationship through code. Or if you have more user-definable things, you could set up your relationships and have the user go in and set up relationships as well. But what Jude showed is programmatically they went in and said, when you do this, when you select that school, it'll go out and create that pick this relationship that was set up,
Right.
and
So-
then create that record.
Correct. So what I did before one of the things I did to set up the demo was to create an entry in this table called school teacher. And it's a school teacher relationship of party A, operating unit, and party B, person. So the relationship between A and B is teaches in, and the relationship between B and A is has teacher.
And you called the school teacher as text.
Yeah,
just
so
create-
so
okay.
what would happen is in my code, there's also one more thing I forgot. There's an enum as well. I'll show you in my code. Sorry. So I have an enum here first that I added as well, called school. Then in my code in the table, when I'm creating a teacher, what I'm doing here is, it's one of the things I forgot. We also expose another API called create record relations in the third-party relationship table. And all that takes is the type of school, the rec ID for the party rec ID for the school, and the party rec ID for the person. So I'm in the teacher table, so there's a reference to person. So I pass that in there, and in what I'm doing here initially is just retrieve the school for that teacher, right? Once I get the school for that teacher, I pass the organization, which is the party rec ID for the school.
Yeah,
So that gives that relationship between the person party for the teacher and the organization party for the school.
So it's a combination between enums and
Correct.
data.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have two questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
Is it possible that a party is linked at the same time with multiple sets, so that the party is customer and vendor at the same time?
So repeat the question one more time. Sorry.
Is it possible that a party, so an organization, has multiple roles, so that he is vendor and customer at the same time?
Correct. Yes, you can have that.
You can have that.
It is possible, yeah. You can
Okay.
see from...
Well, answer is good enough for me, actually.
Okay.
When that's possible,
Yeah.
that's fine.
That's the beauty about the new architecture is you can have a party,
Okay.
and you can use that
Yeah.
and play a role of a vendor or play a role of a customer.
Okay.
Right.
And now the second question. a person, so in your example, the teacher,
Okay.
can the teacher be linked with multiple schools, so with multiple organizations? So he teaches at school 1 and at school B.
Oh yeah, you can do that if you. But what I just done for this demo is to create a direct relationship between teacher and school. But I mean, you can extend it anyhow you want and create a many-to-many relationship between teachers and schools.
Okay, thank you.
Do you provide special functions for mass data import of address data into the global address book?
Yes, we do. So we have the service. Yeah, we have another service that we. Oh boy. One second here. We have another service that we expose, where you. It's called the address book service. So we use the zip code as the top hierarchy, and you can actually use that to push in address reference data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I want to. It's only for the zip code. Excuse me, I'm here. It's only for the zip code. The importation.
For the zip, no, not just zip code and all address references.
The top of the information are only the zip code?
So the service is available for the zip code, and when you bring in that information, it'll also create any cities, states that it's needed that are associated to that zip code. One of the reasons why we have a service for the zip code specifically is because it uses references back to the country. Rather than saying the code is USA, it points back to the reference in the table of the country. So it's very difficult to bring that information in just with a straight file import. Things for state and county, those you can use a straight import because those are just specific data fields that you've used before.
Thank you.
I was actually going to show you the.
Well, maybe a short question. A lot of our customers have external database where they store all valid addresses, and it's important functionality that they can check the addresses when they are entered. And I would like to know if there's any feature foreseen for doing this check, or will that be the external database that would have to expose a web service?
So there's no features out of the box to validate at this point.
Okay.
But it's definitely on our wish list of something to come in the future. But there's nothing prohibiting what we've done in order to continue and to validate that information. You're just validating against different tables than you used to before.
Okay.
So it still need to be extended to do that validation.
Any more questions?
Just from the perspective of upgrading from 2009, I know that in the code you were storing some of the fields from the global address book in, say, cust table or event table, I guess, for the purpose of virtualization. Did you drop those fields out of cust table and event table now?
Correct.
So none of that is happening.
None of the GAB-related fields are in the entities anymore. Yeah. Any more questions?
Please, the white paper is printed out and sitting on the chair on the side of the door over here if you want to pick that up.
So depending on which store you
go. Oh, either one, I guess. It's there. And it will also be available in the bits that you get after the conference.
And please remember to fill out your evaluations when you get your email this evening.
Thank you.